Welcome everybody to another episode of the Key to Games podcast here on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. We have hopefully a very chill conversation lined up today, but joining me, my co-host from Casual Game Studio, Joshua Reyes. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It's been a pretty eventful week, just getting the kids back to school, dev, run-of-the-mill stuff. But this drama kind of popped up, so we're gonna have to deal with it. Josh, how are you doing? Getting books done?
Sweating seems to be what I did this past week.
Sweatingly book creation.
Air conditioning is still out. It will hopefully be in by Tuesday. We got someone to do it like 3 days earlier, so thank you at least on that. I bought like 5 different fans in like various rooms and sizes and shapes. I installed a portable AC for my family in one bedroom. It doesn't fit in mine, so I've been using the fans. Today has been very nice and chill, and then tomorrow back up to like 95 degrees.
Right. So. Yeah, it's actually pretty good over here. Pretty chill.
So at least
just like the drama.
Exactly. So at least we'll do the recording now, and that way I'll sweat it all tomorrow. As a Game Jam update, we're up to 55 signups, which is
amazing.
We predicted, right? It was either be like 2 people or we'll get a ton of people.
Exactly.
And I had to extend it out 1 additional week because people were having trouble with the topic. I gave them such a hard one. But I think going forward, I'll make it 10 days as kind of like the limit. I think 10 days is more than enough for a jam like this.
Yeah, but definitely.
I expect all the volume sliders in all the submissions now.
You know what? That gives me a little extra time. I was trying to get my how to game jam video out in the week. I ran into some delays. I forgot how fun video editing was, Josh. It's been a little bit, and so I'm running behind on that. Give me some time to get that out, and hopefully give everyone some time to breathe and really wrap their heads around the idea and get those volume sliders in. All Josh menu options 211 at least, and we should be good.
And yes, you'll probably be hearing fans and curtains and everything blowing around me with all the windows we have open, trying to get air circulating in here. But with that, let's get to our loving topic, because this is, of course, a very fun one. As we talk, the curtain just keeps extending more and more out. But as everyone knows, a little game called Baldur's Gate 3 came out I think it's been like a week or two at this point. Yeah. And it didn't do well at all. Like, no one's talking about it, no one's covering it. It's been, that like a little game like Elden Ring or Armored Core that's coming out.
Right. Yeah. Very, very just under the radar. I'm surprised no one's really. I mean, I guess like D&D isn't really hot right now. There's no movies out, so it just wasn't the right timing, Josh. I think that's the issue.
Yeah. So as we are sitting here, it is sitting at, I can't wait to see how many reviews. We're at just over 190,000 reviews for Baldur's Gate 3 on Steam. We're not even talking about consoles yet.
Yeah.
And to say the least, it is a huge success for Larian. And again, like, I know Larian as far back as Divine Divinity. That may be a deep cut for a few of you watching this. But definitely all the praise and thumbs up to Larian for their release. So the quote-unquote controversy came about as we were talking about what does it mean for the future market. And that is always a tough thing. So the person who kicked this off was indie developer, and we've had him on several times on the cast. I'm hoping not to butcher his name. Xavier Nelson. And he's, of course, from Strange Scaffolding. He's his next game, El Paso Elsewhere, is due out next month. And he made a thread talking about how this should not be considered the norm going forward. And it led to, oh my goodness, not a lot of discussion. Nothing bad, right?
I spent a lot of time in that thread. My word. It just went on for eons. But yeah. Yeah, not too much. I was really surprised. Everyone kept it civil. I was like, man, we're really growing up. Everybody's understanding the game industry.
We can all go play Valorant and Dota after this.
Right.
We'll all hold hands and sing Kumbaya and run around a circle in a field.
Right. And just enjoy our microtransactions together.
And I got to watch more. Josh covered things on the Twitter side. I watched as many of the YouTuber and streamer discussions on this that I could handle, which apparently is not a lot. But I learned there's even more people out there with horrible takes when it comes to game dev and being in the industry.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a lot to cover here. So I think let's start with the original thread, and then we'll talk about how people are running into so many misconceptions of it. So, Zolivier talked about how this is very much an outlier when it comes to game development and RPG design. And again, like when we talk about what goes into game dev, it is still a very nebulous topic. And when we get to some of the reaction videos and comments in a few minutes, this will come up again in spades. But when we talk about Larian, a lot of things had to have gone, and they did go right, for Baldur's Gate 3 to succeed. And I think two of the points that he brought that's very important. One is that the game has been in development for at least 6 years, but it's technically been out for at least 3. It's been in early access for just, again, around 3 years. And the shocking part for people who don't follow early access, that's not even considered a long time in early access. I've seen games like 5, 7, 8 years in early access. Like, this is still, like, medium side of things.
Yeah, definitely. So, this game had... The one thing that we need to keep in mind, though, is like this studio has been around for a while, like 27 years, right? And like you said, what was it? Divinity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they've been around for a long time. They've been working. Divinity Original Sin, Divinity Original 2. So there's a lot of things in that thread that when you break it down, like there's a lot of pedigree that this studio was bringing forth, right? Like a tremendous amount. And like, I think that a lot of the people stayed in the studio. So a lot of the knowledge base, a lot of all of that has been, just been cumulatively building since then, right? And so that's so very important. Like we're going to talk about like eventually there's like a broader takeaway, I think, that about the industry from this, but they just had so much experience and they had the IP and everything like that. And it was just a really good layup for them, and everything, like so many things had to go right for them to get to this point. And they got there. Is it the curtain creep?
Yeah. That's going to be the new feature creep right there.
Yeah. Curtain creep.
Yeah. And I looked it up as well, and the game was not made using like a public game engine. It is made in their own unique engine, which is Divinity 4.0.
Yeah.
And again, like we had our discussion on engines last week.
Yeah.
And game engines are a very big deal when we're talking about what features and utility they provide. I'm sure there's an indie developer right now thinking, oh, I can do Baldur's Gate 3 and Game Maker.
Right.
And somewhere a programmer just had a heart attack as I just said those words.
Right.
And like you just said, the pedigree of the studio is a very important point. We've had this discussion again about how important leads, experienced people can be to a studio. And one, again, of those misconceptions that we oftentimes see is that if you just throw enough money and enough hours at something, it will all magically come together. Like if 100 monkeys type 100 typewriters, they'll produce Shakespeare.
Eventually
we need the video game equivalent of that as well.
Right, definitely. It's definitely not Baldur's Gate, though. I mean, this again, like the predicate, like the engine, like Divinity Original Sin 2 was, I think, or 1 was using the Gamebryo engine. So they did switch over to this, like after two, so like the whole development was on also a completely new engine, right? So like they were taking everything they could from the original, all everything that they've learned before and applying it to this. Is a very unique case, right? So that's something that Xavier Nelson was highlighting, is that it's a very unique case, and like not something that most devs will be able to do, right? There's not going to be able, like, even if you could take like a 50-person team, you threw I don't know how much money at it, the chances of you coming out with something like this probably won't happen, right? That's the thing, is that it is an anomaly in a way, but kind of like a depressingly sad fact is when we'll get to it later, I don't think it should be an anomaly in a way, right? Like, I think a lot of the issues that are apparent are due to the way that publisher restraints are set up, earnings calls, things like that studios are beholden to, that are underneath the scene. And although consumers could care less, right, it doesn't even matter in the end, right? They're like, oh, I'm sorry, your publisher pulled your money out from you, or this and that, and you couldn't afford it. It's really not something that consumers care about, but it's something that I think needs, that they were trying to make aware, the people that did tweet about this, the developers that did tweet, even in like the IGN one. I did manage to watch that one. Man, it took me a while to like, finally I sat down, I got some caffeine, I was like, all right, dude, and I tried to make it through it. I made it through it, and yeah, super hot take. But even then, like he was like saying that Xavier was a AAA developer, which he is not, right? And so like they weren't even deciding what was right in what devs were saying. There were some AAA devs chiming in, saying like, this is clearly like Rockstar level scope and stuff like that. But I don't know if it truly is. It was just a long development cycle, 3 years of EA, a really good IP, and then they had the luxury of like, they didn't even release on the PlayStation 5, like, on the release date, right? It was PC. They're still making sure it works. Like, I was having issues with my save file just earlier, right? There's bugs that are popping up and they have time to fix it. And that's a luxury that they have.
Yep. And I only believe it's out in Japan. I think it's going to be ported to Japan. Let me see. I can't find it here. But yeah, as I'm looking this up, to your point, it is a very challenging affair when it comes to games of this size and scope. And like as Olivier mentioned, as you were saying, and to like the other people who are commenting on this, it's one of those things, as we said, that it's both inherently risky, but at the same time, a lot of those risks that we've talked about were mitigated by Larian themselves. This is not a studio that just showed up one day saying, we want to make a D&D game. They, again, have 20 plus years of experience making RPGs, working on their engines. And again, like, it has to be said how much Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2 really factored into this. Because one of those major challenges of game dev is growing as a studio, being able to do more, being able to experience more and add that to your game. And it's what we see as the opposite of a lot of indie studios who don't do that, who they end up just making the same game over and over again, making those same mistakes, making those same problems. But like we've said, when we look at studios like Clay, Kid Fox, Larian, let's see, we could probably factor Supergiant Games, New Blood Interactive in here. They are willing to keep growing and doing more. And this is what leads to these studios. We've had this conversation about the idea of, the AAA indie or AA indie studio. This is what leads into these talks. And you have a studio that's been around for 5, 10 plus years who has put out hit after hit after hit, and having that flexibility. Again, like you said, most indie studios, and probably most AAA studios, don't have that luxury of saying, we're going to be on early access for 3 years. We're going to spend this time to make this game perfect. Again, Nintendo, has that luxury. Nintendo can just say, you know what, we're delaying this game for 5 years and deal with it. And their fans would deal with that. Rockstar would also be in that same level. And as you said, like with that quote about, Rockstar levels of scope, this is again one of those luxuries that is afforded to a studio that kind of sits on that outlier. Again, like one of those misconceptions, and this will come as we bring in more of the reactionary side of things into this, is this idea that every studio can be a Rockstar Games, or every studio has the resources of a Nintendo, of a Blizzard, of a Valve. And again, it's not how that works. Again, for the indie developers in chat right now, let me know, how many millions of dollars you have that you can, work on a game for 15 years. And, add in every voice line you could imagine. Let me know what that scope is going on.
Exactly. I mean, after this, I'm jumping on my yacht to program on the Samurai Pig, so no worries.
Mm-hmm. And hey, Rat's Tail, thanks for stopping by. And when we look at kind of more into this, like we've said, the amount of work that Larian did, it's not just, and this is something that we've said before, when we look at the success of, or these breakout games, it's not just the amount of time it took them to release that one game. It is all the time that's been spent at that studio honing these designs and this craft. There is no way in heck they could have said, okay, here's Divine Divinity 1, and here's Baldur's Gate 3. That would have never happened. And it's so easy, again, I think, for people to not understand how much studio culture, studio development, and again, the expertise. And that's something that you can't really buy with money. You can't just say, let's just take 30 of the best RPG designers, programmers, put them in a room. 1 year later, we have Baldur's Gate 4.
Yeah, sadly, it doesn't work that way. I mean, it really takes like camaraderie, working together, experience, and like common goals, right? Like if you listen to the studio director, like he's super passionate about like where he wanted to go with this, right? We were talking about like designers forefront, and that was like, he had the tenets of the game. And like this company, as I was doing research on them, I mean, they were almost on the verge of bankruptcy, like 10 years, like I don't know how many years, right? Like taking risks. They were doing things like, hire contract work to try and pay, so they want to be beholden to publishers. I think they got a lot of this funding from VC, right? And then like, the D&T, the IP came, they approached them with the IP, right? So like everything came together, but they wouldn't have been approached with that IP without the previous work, right? Of Divinity Original Sin, the definitive edition, right? And even then, when those games came out, I think the first one, when it came out, it had some issues, and they had the luxury of like re-releasing or another like a better version, right? Enhanced version, if I'm wrong on that. But they had so many luxuries that many studios would just be like, earnings call would come up and shut the studio down, right? And so they weren't beholden to this. And so that's why, in a way, they are an anomaly, right? But like one of the, like, I think the depressingly sad things about it is like it shouldn't be an anomaly at all, right? And I think this is like what consumers are saying, like, hey, wait a second, are you saying games shouldn't be good? And it's like, no one's saying the games shouldn't be good or that the standards shouldn't be good. It's just like the way that what studios have to do to bow down to their publishers or meet certain deadlines, meet the earning calls, right? They could just have the rug pulled over them, or they don't have the luxury of doing that, right? And then because of that, you can have high turnover rate in a studio. And then due to that, like the studio isn't allowed to grow, to expand, or even take chances. And that's why you see like so many AAA games, right? The AAA malaise, everything's the same. Everything's regurgitated because they're so afraid to take chances. The board members are like, no, it has to be the same shooter, same thing. That's what works. Microtransactions are making us money. That's what we have to do. And, like one of the highlighted points is like, this game doesn't have microtransactions. And again, that's because of the particular position that they were in. So.
And I think to clarify, I believe Larian actually purchased the IP
Did
from
they purchase it?
D&D. Like
Okay.
they didn't. Was it Hasbro? I think owns D&D now. Like they did not. Hasbro didn't approach Larian saying we want you to make a game. Larian approached them saying we want to make Baldur's Gate 3. You have the D&D license. How
Thank you.
much do we have to spend to make this work? And that was one of the
Right.
misconceptions a few people were arguing about, saying, oh, they succeed because they got a successful IP. No, they had to pay for that IP. It wasn't given to them. And again, like to that point we were just saying regarding like the developers thinking like why things couldn't be like this. It's very similar to what we were seeing with the Elden Ring discussion. That point
Yeah.
will come up again in the next few minutes for sure. But this idea that what they do that has earned them millions of dollars in accolades, a studio like Larian comes along, a studio like From Software comes along, does what is considered, again, kind of like the opposite of what you've been told, and, succeeds like gangbusters. And it is very tough. And like we said, like a major part of this discussion is what lessons should you take away? The lesson should not be go make Baldur's Gate 4. And we'll talk more about that later on. And it's very hard, I think, sometimes to square that sort of like to Ratsail's comment about making what you want versus making what
It
sells.
sells.
In the
Yeah.
perfect world, making what you want would be the
Does
thing
sell.
that sells. But in a lot of cases, it's not. And it's very hard, and to Malwinius' comment there, that a lot of people don't understand when a game blows up, what that studio did to make it work. Like you said, like when you looked up Larian, like they were in trouble for quite a long time. And again, they have been around since I think like 2003, 2004 with Divinity or Divine Divinity, and those games, I can tell you, they did not become mainstream successes. They did not blow up. I think the first game of theirs that hit that level was Divinity Original Sin. I think that was a Kickstarter game, right?
Yes,
Okay.
kickstarted. Yes, it was kickstarted.
And so they didn't just show up one day with Baldur's Gate 3. It takes a lot of these factors in order for this to work. And like we've said, just like with a Baldur's Gate or with a Cuphead, it could have still failed. They could have
Yeah.
made that game, released it, and everyone was like, I don't want to play a CRPG. I mean, for everyone watching, I know we all think JRPGs are inherently superior, right?
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
That won't get me in any more trouble, right?
I mean, and just real quick to mention, with the Kickstarter of Divinity Original Sin, they followed like a almost similar blueprint to what they're doing now. Like they did early access, right? So like they kickstarted it, they community involvement, community engagement, early access. So it was almost a similar blueprint that they've been following, right? And executing before. So it's not something that like they never have done something like this before. This is something they have a lot of experience and pedigree with. And so again, right, you just don't start from Divinity and get to Baldur's Gate 3. Like it took a massive amount of work to get here. And so not seeing what has been done before is totally a fault, misunderstanding, right? On what is needed and required to get there.
Yeah, and again, the same thing we can talk about with something like Clay Entertainment. They were around for quite a long time before they got to Don't Starve, Auction Not Included, and it's so easy for people to only look at these games, or look at these studios, as that first big hit. That they didn't exist, or they just kind of like coalesced into being right with this, Game of the Year winning massive success. But it takes a lot of work. And again, if you're trying to grow as a developer, you're not going to have... I know everyone wants to have their own Baldur's Gate 3 as their very first title.
Yeah.
Most likely, it is not going to happen. And again, like as we were talking about with the Vampire Survivor likes, a lot of people thought, well, he just showed up one day, put all this stuff together, boom, Vampire Survivor's $1 billion success. No, he had experience in the mobile game and gambling market. He had a background of working in games to build that title. And there was no way he would be able to build a game like Vampire Survivors without experience in these respective designs and these kinds of the psychological loops there.
Exactly. Yeah. If he didn't have a hard grasp on those psychological loops and everything, like the game just wouldn't work at all, right? So yeah, it's just, like even like Fall Guys. I remember people thought like, oh, they just came out of nowhere and they literally made like 1,000 games before that, right? Like maybe like 50 games before that. But it's just another one of those things that when games come out, they think, okay, that's your first game. And clearly it never really is, never truly is. It's so rare.
Yep.
I can't really even think of an example of like a dev's first game coming out and working. And if it does, do they have a follow up, right?
Yep.
So,
and don't forget that the veterancy of the people working at the studio matters. Because you can have a first time studio, but it's all helmed by people with 20, 30 years plus of industry experience.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that industry experience just magically makes your game better. But again, understanding what goes into game dev, that is something that you can only really do once you've worked on a game or two. Again, it's why we have a Game Wisdom Game Jam going on, which I'm sure everyone... Again, let me know who's going to do the opposite of Baldur's Gate 3 for the Game Jam. Let me know when you have that on there.
There you go.
And
Game Maker's there.
There you go. RPG Maker's there too.
RPG Maker, yeah. RPG Maker Ace.
Mm-hmm. And as we're saying, these elements are that X factor that goes into some of these titles. And it is possible for someone to have that first game look, as we saw someone with Minecraft's creator. But then they never really managed to follow that up with anything even comparable to that. And what we see with Larian is that most likely, when the shock of the success dies down, I'm sure they have another idea for a CRPG in the coming years. Now, whether that one will take another 6 years of development, again, we don't know. And that's kind of that point. That you can't just say, industry experience plus engine, that takes off 2 years of development of a game.
Right. Yeah. Again, there's no formula, there's no blueprint. And all it takes is just iteration and to keep working and the experience. But yeah, like if there was a blueprint, we'd be rich right now, so there's not.
Yeah. And it also takes being able to weather that storm of surviving all that time to get that knowledge. Because like we said, if they went out of business after Divine Divinity 1 or one of their earlier games, they wouldn't have been a Baldur's Gate 3.
Right. Yeah. And and if this one didn't survive, this would have been a massive blow to the studio, right? And what if, their next game, right? And they try to make an even more massive, more giant, more interactive, like the biggest Baldur's Gate 4 possible. I don't whatever IP they're going to work on, and it fails, it could still close the studio, right? They're taking it's a massive risk, and it just how much time they spent at the brink of bankruptcy to get to this point just shows how perilous the industry is, right? And so there's a bigger topic about the industry as a whole that we can extrapolate from that.
Mm-hmm. And no one wants to hear that, unfortunately. They think that, if it's sold... here's that other very popular misconception. If your game sold 1 million copies, that means you're automatically a millionaire.
Right. Or that they're safe, right? Now they're safe, and they can, release another game, and there's no problem. Even if it fails, you'll still be fine, and that's not true, right? That's why it's so hard to create a follow-up, and especially when they've reached this apex now. They're sitting at Metacritic above Breath of the Wild, above Tears of the Kingdom, above Elden Ring. The only other game on OpenCritic is Super Mario Odyssey above it. That is what an amazing feat, right? So how can you top that?
How can we top that? Do we have any... Do we have any tips from the chat on that one?
Tips in chat, let us know.
Someone here design me Baldur's Gate 4 by the end of the show.
Oh, that's right. Vincent's hometown studio. Mm-hmm. That's right.
All right. Again, let us know when you have Baldur's Gate 4, like for anyone watching.
Yeah, just...
And again, it is one of those inherent risks of game development. And it's why we see some of the more successful studios, they will focus on a specific genre. They will, again, hammer that point home. Or refine it to that, crystal or that mirrored sheen of what kind of design they want. Now, some studios have that luxury of being able to do very different things, as we said with Clay and Supergiant. But again, studio culture and the people behind it really do matter in that respect. If, as another example, this was something that was very funny that came up, but I think a lot of people forgot that, oh, now I forgot the name. The game from Tango Gameworks that came out earlier this year. The musical theme one that we all enjoyed. But,
jeez.
Yeah, I know. Let's see if I can speed run it out here and find it. But while I'm looking up the name of it, again, like that game came from a studio that for a long time was just known Hi-Fi Rush. I think that's
Hi-Fi Rush, yeah.
And they just like sprung it on people. And it did a lot of success. Now imagine if it came out right now, probably wouldn't have done as well. Again, just because of how some of these games can just eclipse everything. But the point that I wanted to make is Tango has been around for quite a long time. I think they're at least a decade old at this point. And this game kind of came out by one of their designers being very passionate and taking the lead to make that. And you can't just, like, there's no studio in this world that, someone is going to be hired day one and say, let me make my dream game. And they say, yeah, okay, go for it. Here's a team, here you go. I know all the students watching this would probably dream of that. But no, it takes a lot of time, and it takes a studio becoming very comfortable with itself to be able to say, you know what, we made horror games and Japanese horror. Let's make Hi-Fi Rush.
Right. Definitely. To be able to pivot like that. And again, but that takes a lot of studio knowledge, like inner studio knowledge, and the ability for all of the workers to be able to, or all the devs to be able to lean on each other and know each other's strengths and weaknesses. And that just doesn't come overnight, right? Like I'm thinking minimum for a studio to get really good and for, to get greased up really well and everybody start. I mean, you're looking at maybe 5-10 years minimum, right? Before you can start developing something reputable, or you could say, okay, this studio has it going on, or we're starting to work towards something. It takes a really long time.
Yep. And it takes understanding and growing as a studio as well, because you could make games for 10 years, but if you're not improving, or if you're
just repeating the same thing over and over again, as you said, yeah.
And again, it's why this is very tough to do. And to Vince's comment, is that right that 9,000 people worked on Diablo 4? It's hard to tell these days, like what's a joke and what's real when it comes to some of these studios.
I'm sure that's pretty close though, right? And so I was actually, okay, so how long did it take Rockstar to make GTA 5? And how long did it take Diablo? I was trying to get the numbers on Diablo. I couldn't get clear numbers on that, so I'm going to go with Vincent, about 9,000. But again, it that shows that it doesn't matter how much money you throw at it, how much experience you throw at it. And I mean, I'm assuming a team, whoever was working on Diablo, ensuring it wasn't like the heart and soul and blood, like the original members, or like the original knowledge base that was there. And so maybe you have devs that are trying to recreate something that they maybe just don't understand, right? And also they're working under a different pressure. I definitely don't want to let Blizzard off the hook by any way, but I'm sure that they're under different financial constraints through the board members, the CEO meetings and stuff like that. like earnings calls, and it's like, hey, you know what? Overwatch 2 isn't doing good. We need more microtransactions in there for you to like meet the financial quarter goal. And it's like, and then of course they're going to blame the devs, but sometimes the devs are at the will of the publisher, right? So, but I'm not taking any blame off of Blizzard, of course. They are a very large studio, and they have the ability to create something right on the level of Baldur's Gate. They have the ability, a very polished game, and they do have the knowledge base there. But again, it's just, everybody's studio situation is different. So.
And yeah, I think that is probably a good segue to talk about how the community and the YouTuber and Twitch space reacted to things.
I'd like to know what you gathered there.
Oh boy. And yeah, to Vince's comment, he is right. Like, it has been reported that at least over 9,000 people worked on Diablo 4. Yeah. And yeah, to Malwinia's point, exactly. Like, it still had a lot of issues, and they made it worse with the season. And again, we'll kind of like bring this all in as we get to this next point. So, following that thread, the IGN video went up. I only watched about 4 minutes of it. I just couldn't get any more. They
was like 4 minutes and 30 seconds, Josh. Like,
maybe it was less than that. I don't know. I couldn't watch the whole thing. But again, they were referring to Xalavier as a AAA developer.
AAA dev.
See, I only know him as the king of old Denny's, and that's an indie dev deep cut for those of you watching this right now. And of course, this led to everyone having to weigh in on this. And as it once again turns out, a lot of people who talk about video games on YouTube and Twitch know very little about video games and design on Twitch and YouTube. And, oh my goodness, again, I'm not going to name names. We don't want that level of drama here, at least not until we get a few more 1,000 subscribers, and then we'll attack everyone for sure.
Yes, yeah. We just need to get a few more K, and then everybody's on the chopping block, man.
Yeah. So some of the comments that came up that I really loved. So one which is really starting to sound like a new dog whistle is complaining about how Western developers have fallen. Western developers are killing the industry, and it seems like, I don't know, this is giving me Gamergate parallels when I just keep, because it's the same talking point in a lot of these reactionary videos that, it's the fall of Western developers. Western devs have ruined it. They're the ones who are fighting against Baldur's Gate, when, again, Larian, I think, is a European studio, so wouldn't they still be considered a Western developer? At least when we do the whole CRPG, JRPG argument.
Yeah, indeed.
And some of the other points. So one person said that, and from the IGN video, they were talking about, well, why can't Diablo, Diablo, Bungie, and Call of Duty do all kinds of stuff? And all I heard was, why can't Activision? Again, people who still don't understand, as you've been saying, don't understand just how much publisher interference really matters. Oh, and you're going to love this one, and I for all the indie developers watching this right now, I hope you're sitting down, because you're going to love this take. One of the people who were making one of these videos said that, you know what I think? I think it's because developers are afraid of over-promising and putting extra work into their video games. And that's why we can't get another Baldur's Gate. They're afraid of putting too much into their games.
Yeah, it's just that's the issue. We don't want to put too much. We don't want to over-promise, over-deliver. That is definitely what we're scared of. It's one of our biggest fears. Now we know. So, you know what I mean? I mean, clearly, the lesson that we should learn is that, pins down, pens and pencils down. The best game has already been done. There's no need to try more. It's it, right? The bar has been raised. Compete, so we might as well give up. That's the lesson to be learned.
And so many other takes. Again, people arguing about why can't they get Baldur's Gate from other studios. And again, this is where the IGN video was kind of focusing on. Yeah. But like we've said, the point about this is not so much about the developer, at least when we talk about the AAA level. We're talking about the publisher interference and what lessons you can take away from this. As we've said, one of the major things people keep arguing is that there's no microtransactions in Baldur's Gate. And
Yeah.
one of the reasons for that is, again, that they do not have publisher interference at Larian Studios. But when we saw the rise of mobile and live service over the past 7 years, 8 years at this point, people want live service, or I should say, publishers want live service. This has led to microtransactions, loot boxes, cosmetic skins, and all that other great stuff, as my camera just completely faded out as I said that. And it is this difficulty of, again, understanding why games succeed. Again, there are people who are trying to defend Larian and they're making the wrong points. Again, saying that, oh, we shouldn't, it's not that big of a deal. They had all this great stuff that worked for them and that's why Baldur's Gate succeeded. No. Again, you can be wrong on both sides of this, either defending or trying to criticize this point. And I think, again, with Zalavir's original tweet, I think he was pretty spot on. Again, the only pushback I would have on it is on the idea of what to learn from it. Again, I think that would be kind of the final point.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I'll say that for the final.
To bring this back to the reactionary side, I guess I'll throw it over to you. What did you see on the Twitter side or the social media side?
I just saw really people were taking from the tweet first, I don't think the tweet was worded perfectly right. There was a few issues that I could say, okay, people that, consumers that don't really understand or don't really study or don't really care how games are made, right? Because in all honesty, they don't have to, right? All they need, this fly is just obsessed with me. All they want to do is just have a finished game and a finished product, and that's really what they care about. Like I've said many times before, they don't care how hard devs work or what they have to go through or any of that. And I think a lot of the points were just look, we do expect better games, and so why can't everybody else do exactly what they're doing? See, they did this. This studio was capable of doing this, so thus every other studio can do this. Now that they see that it can, I think I ate the fly. Now that they see that every studio that a studio can do this, so the bar has been raised, right? And we were just raised, and that is a lot of the takes that I was. It's first of all, consumers are really upset with AAA development right now. That is just the main thing, is that everybody is upset. Of course, you are always saying, the indie side is there for us. Right now, this is the time to be looking. And of course, Larian came out as, I don't know, what would you call them now? A double A, or are they AAA now? I don't know. But a studio of that caliber, not really beholden to let's say in the AAA space, was able to do that. So thus everybody else should. So that was basically it. Just a lot of bad takes, not really understanding how the process works or how the studio got there or how another studio could achieve that, basically.
And again, a lot of these annoying takes has been this idea that it's just that simple now.
Just that simple now, yeah.
That because, again, that the bar has been raised, now everyone can make a Baldur's Gate. And one of the points, again, that Zalavier made, that a lot of people attacked him for, but it's kind of poignant, is that don't expect to see a game like Baldur's Gate 3 in the next decade.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, again, a lot of people who don't understand game dev are, well, why can't we? Well, for one thing, it took about 6 years of development for the game to be released, and we're almost in 2024 right now, so...
Yeah, just math and understanding development time, it would literally take... if Rockstar was hey, we're going to make one right now, it would take them, quite a while to get it done, and they're not going to release it until it's pretty good and in good shape, right? I mean, but that's just how it is. Just development time would take that long. If I'm okay, you know what? I got my funding. Start this Baldur's Gate 4 right now. I bought it would literally take that long to make it. Like, even in like we're going to do Baldur's Gate 4 now. I'm thinking, what's the minimum they could do it in, 4 or 5 years, right? Like minimum. And I don't think that they're going to want it as quickly as possible. They're going to want to make sure it's, because now they have to follow up with such a big hit if they desire to. And so they're definitely going to put as much perfection as possible on it. Like this one take, it's perplexing to see game developers telling consumers not to raise their expectations. Baldur's Gate 3 is what happens when a game studio executes on their vision and they're passionate about it without needing to compromise. That's it. And yeah, that's what every studio wants to do. I guarantee you that there's no lazy game developer. If you're in this, if you were a game developer, you're not lazy. There's nothing that we want to compromise or change, but the game of game development is kind of that way, depending on what position you're in, right? Sometimes we have to cut mechanics due to, of course, time and our budget and our, like, just do we have the staff or do I have a programmer that can understand that or help me with that, right? There's so many constraints around it that we have to work through those things need to be understood, right? It's like a game of this caliber. It's like, how often did we see I don't know, Skyrim, right? How long did it take Skyrim to be made? How long did it take? Name some other awesome game, Josh, that took a long time. Hades, right? Mm-hmm. Hades took how long? Was it 6 years? 4 years?
Well, I know they spent at least, I think, 2 years in early access.
Right. So again, like, if like that early access that we keep hearing is definitely key, right? Like gathering information from your community, getting things together, finding out what works and what doesn't, and when it's actually early access, it's like a giant bug test, right? In a way, and if a company has the luxury of doing it, they do.
Mm-hmm. And again, like, people are, well, why can't you make a game like Nintendo? Or make a game like this?
I wish.
Again, there's that X factor of what the studio culture, and again, like, to the point we were saying earlier about where Larian goes from here. Larian is definitely not considered in the same space as other indie developers anymore. As we said, like, when you hit that level of success enough, you are afforded a lot more freedom and a lot more clout than any other studio or other studios have access to. And again, even if they say, you know what, I bet if they say, maybe we would need a publisher for this next game, if they put out that word, I will guarantee you they will have calls coming in from every major publisher within 24 hours. Definitely. Again, for the other indie developers watching this, let me know how fast Epic, Nintendo, and EA will respond to your email.
Right. Vince, how long did it take?
Mm-hmm. Again, as I said, my goal in 2023 is to give as many developers PTSD with my discussions.
Right, definitely.
And when we see this kind of level of popularity and that level of renown, it is something that it's not as you can't replicate it as much as you would think, even among major studios. So I think that's a good point to bring in Diablo in the discussion, because a lot of the Diablo fans have had some horrible takes, or I should say fans of Diablo 4 have had some annoying takes about Baldur's Gate 3 as well.
Anybody still playing Diablo 4?
I don't know. And like we've said, there's a difference in these designs, or a difference in the studio mentality and methodology of these games. Diablo 4, people are still saying, well, Blizzard is fallen, Blizzard is dead, blah, 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 when they should be saying Activision is the one who pushed a lot of this on there. And again, this is where we talk about how studio culture matters. I can tell you with a lot of certainty, without ever stepping foot in either studio, that working at Larian Studios is probably very different than working at Blizzard Entertainment or Activision Blizzard, however we want to call them.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'd rather work at Larian.
Mm-hmm. or on your yacht.
Or my yacht. Sorry, I got my yacht. What am I talking?
Mm-hmm. And again, it's that very tough thing. Like Diablo 4, I am very curious. What was the development cost on Diablo 4? And they had a lot of money and weight. And again, this is one of those points that you should take away from Baldur's Gate's 3 success. That again, resources by themselves don't inherently make a game better. And it takes craft and skill to be able to make a good, a high quality, just any quality game these days.
Yeah, I'm looking at 11.7 million for Diablo 4. I don't even think that's right. That's the only number I've seen. And then a nice one says 666 million. So whichever one.
And for people who are hating on Diablo 4, a lot of what makes that game bad. Like again, I still see people who are like confused about how did Diablo 4 turn out this way, or what the heck happened. It's very easy to figure out what happened.
It's super apparent. Yeah, it's super apparent. And it's like, wait, why is this it seems like it's a cash store with a game inside of it. Well, I wonder why, right? I mean, it's go ahead, Josh.
No, go ahead. I was agreeing with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's super apparent. Like that is where the publishers, like what they demand, right? Like I can guarantee you that there were so many devs working on Diablo that were like, oh my gosh, we have to make these skins and we have to put these skins and we have to make these transactions first, or otherwise we won't get funding and they're going to shut it down and or just give it to another studio to work. Like it is not it wasn't like their core decision originally, right? Like again, the developers are in to their publishers, and that's the constraints, and that's the reason why. And it's so apparent when you look at all of these AAA games, you know where they're coming from. And of course, like if I was if I was like playing all these games, I would totally feel sour. I'd be like, whoa, what happened to my Diablo? What happened to my love if I loved Blizzard? And, you know, what happened to my Blizzard and what happened to these studios? And it's really what happened and the corporate structure that changed and how capitalism and the boardroom come for one of the most profitable industries like that we have right now, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was saying, don't forget studio culture changes. When you fire people or when they leave, you can be that name of that name brand of that studio. That doesn't mean you're the same studio it was 3, 5, 10 years old.
Just like it could be just like a football team, right? We're changing coaches, we're changing we're changing the main players. Your quarterback is different. You have a different defense. Like it's all different, and just the name is just basically a shell, right? And then you want to also think about like the morale. So like if we're talking about the human side of development, like all of those guys are guys and gals are working. What is my job on the line? You see like layoffs left and right, and so like not only is it like perilous working in the industry, it's perilous studio. It's a very perilous like industry, and so like again, I'm using this word, they are, and sadly that's where they sit right now. So.
And I mean, we saw the same thing with Maxis. That Maxis limped on for several more years after Will Wright left, but people were still saying, well, Maxis has fallen, or whatever happened to Maxis. Well, the answer is all the people who made those games you love no longer work at Maxis. And like we said, like with the Team Ninja example with Neo, they were fluttering for some time after Itagaki got fired or was removed as the studio head. And it took them, I think, about a decade for them to really bounce back with Neo. And as you said earlier, like 5 to 10 years minimal sometimes for a studio to really get into that groove. And again, when we say like 5-10 years minimal, again, you are making games during that time. It's not like you're just working on one game for 10 years. You are learning, you are improving. And it's one of those things that really separates companies that go above and beyond and the ones that don't, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly.
And let's see, what is our time? We're about at an hour in terms of the recording. I think maybe another 20 minutes, I think, should be enough for this. We still have to talk about like lessons learned, but anything else from the reactionaries? So I'm trying to think if there's anything else I'm trying to remember.
Let me see here. I'm looking through here. Let's see here. I think that's all in the reactionary, unless you could see anyone else in chat found some really cool. I think they're all about in the same vein.
Yep, and again, like the people who are like putting out hit pieces, or the ones who are attacking developers, saying that they're to not get your expectations so high. Again, like the people who are saying this are from the independent space.
Yeah,
and there are developers out there who are worried about Baldur's Gate 3 in terms of what it means for their RPG. Because again, like one of those other points we've said is that game design is not fast. Again, when we say fast in game dev, that's still 2 to 3 years minimum.
Yeah.
Maybe year and a half, I think, at like the absolute minimum to have
lightning fast, right? Yeah.
Something like that. So if your immediate thought is, well, Baldur's Gate 3 is out, so my next RPG should be of that quality or better, it ain't happening.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and this happens. Like, I think it's good. Like, I mean, there's been a lot of games that have. Whoa, what am I working on? I think like Astra Libera can't. God, what am I doing with my life? You know, there's been some games that have come out that have really like changed my perspective on things, but that's good, right? Like they've raised the bar. Just like Elden Ring came out and like shake things up about like, you know, quest design and UI design, and like Vampire Survivors is like shake things up, and or Undertale. When these games come out, I mean, I champion them, and I think that is great, and it's amazing that a game comes out of this quality. Honestly, like maybe a hot take that I might have is like, I don't honestly like it's a great game, but like it's kind of what I expected, right? Like I didn't I'm getting a lot of like, I feel like there's like a lot of like people are the baseline is so low right now for like games like AAA games are the mass media's coverage of games, and it comes out and it's like, well, this is kind of like where I was seeing the studio would get, right? From Divinity to, and now they have the IP to work with, and this is where they end up, right? And it's like, yeah, they had money, they had kind of like exactly what I would expect from them, right? I don't feel like it's too much of a stretch to say, yeah, that's what Larian was going to make now this time around. I mean, of course, it could have been a total failure, could have been a total buggy mess, and a total failure. But honestly, that's kind of what I was expecting, right? I didn't expect anything different from the studio. And that's basically what happens when a studio is allowed to like keep some of the very integral, very important people in the studio basically for 27 years, right? There's the same studio lead. Right? Am I wrong? I think it's the same Steve Swen, the same studio lead. Many of the same people have all been there working on it together for so long. And that's the product that you will get, right? And, you know, again, like say, you know, the people are not the workers and the devs, the artists, and they're not pieces simply be replaced. We've talked about this before, is that each one of them is very important. And if they're there and they love working for the studio and they're passionate about what the studio and what they're working for, this is basically what you're going to get.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Bird is squawking in agreement outside my window right now.
Yeah.
Yep, and I think, again, like what you just said, and as a chat is also commenting, I think this is a good segue into talking about what should we take from Baldur's Gate. And let me see here. Grumpy said, indies will find it difficult to clone. Oh no, indies are finding it difficult to clone Vampire Survivors in terms of succeeding with it. Oh, they're still having trouble on that front.
Yeah.
But as you said, and as what we were talking about for this point, like, there are important things to take away from Baldur's Gate 3, and this is the one area where I do push back a little bit on Zalavir's comment about that it shouldn't be used there. It shouldn't raise stakes or anything, because at the end of the day, when a game succeeds, when anything succeeds, it does change the market for good, bad,
Right.
and everything in between. This is
Right.
how we got the kind of the rise of monetization. People saw the success of Team Fortress. They saw Candy Crush, Farmville, Clash of Clans, and so on. But just like on the flip side of that, we saw the success of games like Darkest Dungeon, Vampire. Again, I can just rename all the trends from 2 weeks ago when we named them all. And these games do change what people expect. But the important thing to understand, and this is for developers and consumers as well, is that because Game A succeeds, that doesn't mean you should want Game A again, or you should design Game A. You want to learn what resonated with those people, and Malwinia's comment, I think, is a really good one, that Larry managed to tap into the normal gamer with their game, and that is a very important aspect. It's another thing that we saw with Elden Ring, and again, bringing back how people were arguing, well, why did Elden Ring succeed? Because it was difficult, and they didn't put 27 tutorial prompts. It succeeded because it tapped into this kind of, again, like this larger zeitgeist of people wanting a game that lets them breathe, that lets them explore this world. Same thing goes for Breath of the Wild. Now, again, I have not played Baldur's Gate 3. I think you've started it.
Yes.
So,
yes.
How are you finding it in terms of its design?
I mean, it's good. I mean, I honestly, like, another hot take. Like, I don't. I know that like Vince is in here. I think he has like 200 hours on it, and like, I think I'm at like 5 or 6 hours. And what I take away from it is like, you have a lot of player choice, right? Like, you can choose dialogue options. So it's basically like choose your own adventure, branching paths, like narration. Like, it's a very personal story, but it's changing and it's different. And it's so like, it's really just like what you would expect. I think, to me, it's like exactly what I would expect when you take this IP, this type of studio, and it's just a good CRPG is really all I can say. Is like, that is like how I would expect it to be. How I would expect a good CRPG to be, basically, is my take on it. It offers a lot of cool story choices. Like, I think I accidentally kissed a squid and died. Like, it gave you that option. I was like, well, it's giving me the option to kiss a squid. Well, yeah, let me see. And I died. Right. Or mind flare. Right. And so it like lets you do all kind of strange things and gives you a lot of freedom, like taking to breathe, to move, like, and like gives you time in the combat to think and plan things out. Active and in the combat, like just like the original Divinity, acid on the floor, fire over here. You can move things around. Just a really reactive battlefield. I just think overall it's just a really solid CRPG, and like maybe the market has been missing it for a while and it just dropped at the right time and they just were polishing it enough, but that's my take, is that it's just a really solid CRPG.
And I am curious, for anyone who's playing this, and either watching this live or recorded, if you did not play Divinity, Original Sin 1 or 2, or if you don't have a CRPG background, what do you think about the design of it? Because, like, to bring us back to the Elden Ring example, like, Elden Ring at this point stands as probably From Software's most profitable and most successful game to date. It is a game that I think has done better than all the Dark Souls, all the Bloodborne, and so on. And I think
Metacritic rating.
And a lot of that, again, what people were like, again, like a lot of developers were like arguing against was, why is it doing so well, even with all these issues with it? And again, sometimes that comes with presenting something that is different from what else is on the market. I think Jason Schreier was trying to have a point that it was risky to release a game that had complicated rules to it. But again,
Mm-hmm.
I would argue that it's not about complicated rules, it's about depth. Depth and complexity are not the same. You can
Right.
have a very deep game, but make it very easy to pick up and play. And we could argue Elden Ring is kind of like that. It is
Yeah.
a game that once you're done with that tutorial, here's the whole continent, pick a direction and go in it. And it's a game that kind of respects the player in that kind of aspect of letting them do what they want. As you said, with like the whole choose your own adventure style of Baldur's Gate 3. That this is one of those things that was kind of missing from a lot of CRPGs. This idea that not only can I make a character however I damn well please, but I also want the world to respond to whatever my character is going to do. And that, I can guarantee you, takes a lot of time to implement.
Yeah.
You're not
Yeah.
going to create like a 5 decision tree and then call it a day. Like, this takes a lot of development, takes a lot of writing. And again, this game is fully voiced, so I don't even want to think how many hours of recorded dialogue there is in that game.
That is definitely one takeaway. As I was like, because when I'm playing a game, I'm always analyzing, okay, well, how did they implement the feature? What were they thinking when they were doing this? And so many times I've been playing the game and I was like, oh my gosh, the amount of work for just like this little situation that I encountered, and for things that I did previously to impact what I did here, and then for it to branch off in multiple pathways because of something I chose and the previous things. I was just amazed at the amount of work. And then again, like every choice you make is voiced, and so like that alone, like, imagine catalog, like having all the, how are you going to store all that, the data structures, all that's insane. So yeah, I that is a takeaway. I was playing the game is like the amount of work and programming, and like the team that would, like the cohesiveness of the team to come together to deliver it is a very high level. And that's all from studio knowledge and all their but yeah.
Thank you, Vincent. I was curious about that too.
Well, it you know what, I didn't know it was like very early. Oh, he's like he I don't want to spoil it, but it was like it.
Oh, you're cutting out again. Uh-oh.
So it offered, okay, look, it offered me the choice, and I was like, wait, maybe I'll get some. I just had to see what would happen because I offered me the choice. So because they offered me the choice, I had. So you know,
I mean, that's how we play all video games. You have to go down every choice on the dialogue.
Exactly.
You know that choice is going to give you like plus 30 intelligence for kissing something.
That's what I thought. I thought I was gonna get like a. Yeah, thought I was gonna level up, but no, I died.
And like we've said, when you're looking at successes of a game, what you want to take away from it is, why are people enjoying it? And the answer is not just because it's Baldur's Gate 3, or that it's Darkest Dungeon, or it's FTL. Because if that's your only takeaway, then your thought is going to be, well, I'm just going to make the same thing. And you will never make a game at that same level. Even if you have more story, or even if you have like a larger team and a larger budget, you are never going to compete at that same level because, as we've said before, you're not the first one to do it.
Right. And that is like super important. And so now anybody who comes after, right, is going to be judged by those metrics. So why would you want to put yourself in that situation? The thing is, we want to take away why it's working, what made it work, right? For one, what like the player choices and just the freedom that the game gives you is like one thing. Like it's just it's kind of mind blowing almost. Like compared to how other CRPGs have been compared to that one. So that's just like one thing that you'd want to take from it.
And one thing that I would also suggest taking away from it, study the GUI. Study the UI, UX.
I was taking pictures. That was the first thing I was doing. As soon as I started the game up, I was taking snapshots of the GUI, and I was studying the GUI for quite a while before I even got into the game. Just seeing how the pop-ups look, how information is, how they want to play the information. Because again, we were talking about the game, so it is complex and it is deep. But how do you present everything where I'm not like bogged down by everything, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I was literally playing the game. Not really like in a D&D mindset, right? Like where you're thinking about all, just kind of going through it, and like almost I could ignore many things but still play through it. That's why when you asked her, like don't have experience with CRPGs or original divinities, how they like the game, right? Just as I'm sure many people for Elden Ring, that was their first game, right? So like, is this going to be many people's first CRPGs? I think so.
And again, like while the IP certainly is a factor, so is being able to build this game as approachable as possible. And as a developer, you want to be looking at, again, the reason why you want to look at the UI UX is that this is the one aspect I do believe that the stake raising is certainly justified. Because if someone plays Baldur's Gate 3, wow, my mouth is slurring there, and they enjoy the hell out of that game, and then they go to your RPG, and we're not even talking about depth, we're not even talking about like depth or gameplay, but if your RPG is utterly confusing, if the character creator is so obtuse and annoying to do, guess what? They are going to give your game even less of a time because they can go play Baldur's Gate 3. Just like everyone can go play Slay the Spire and insert that loop again. Because once people understand, or once they enjoy the GUI of a game, that's what they're going to expect going forward. And it's why it becomes so much harder when you purposely design kind of outside the box, or you're kind of coloring outside the lines, when it comes to the GUI of your game. Again, gameplay-wise, you can be very unique, you can be experimental, but there has to be, that landing site for someone to be able to enjoy it. And I'm sure with Baldur's Gate 3, maybe I can somehow reach out to Larry and get someone on to talk about this, but I'm sure there was a period when that game was strictly like CRPG, like uber duper D&D fan.
Yep.
That was it. Like that was all this game was going to be about. And they had to fine tune that. They had to figure out what works and what didn't. And it's very much that same conversation we had with Elden Ring. Elden Ring is built off of the foundation of Demon's Souls, Dark Souls, Bloodborne. But it doesn't play completely like those games. It's an evolved version of it.
Exactly.
And again, it's why you can't just go from, here's my first game, to here's, the culmination of 20 plus years of experience, knowledge, and development, and only do that in like 1 year top. You can speed run that mastery, right?
Right, definitely. I took.
I was like, here's the tip. Just if you restart your computer without saving all your profile, when you go back to it, you'll gain additional rest experience, which will make your game dev go faster. So you can do like 8 days of game dev and maybe like 4.5 if you min-max it right.
Yeah, that's what I do on the yacht.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Power naps and.
And then that's how you make Baldur's Gate 4 in like 2.5 years.
Exactly.
And like we said, like as an indie developer, you should never be directly competing in this respect in terms of trying to make a game of similar scope, of similar design. Again, we're kind of going around a circle to in previous casts, but you have to answer that question: why should I play your game? What makes your game different? Because even if your game has superior gameplay or equal gameplay, you're still competing in terms of the space of that previous hit.
Right. Yeah. Do we want to I don't know if we want to go. Are we already getting to our final topic yet? Final thoughts
I think we're
yet?
kind of there. We're almost there.
Okay, so I think some takeaways that I would want to take away from this is that, okay, for one, okay, well, I'll say it this way. I hope that Baldur's Gate 3 changes the industry a little bit, and every game that comes, they're big, they always should change the industry in a way. But I think that the lesson that okay, publishers and should take away from this is that giving a well qualified studio the ability to and let will probably result, right, not forcing mandated microtransactions and a studio breathe and work on what they're doing and experiment will yield a better product, right? This was definitely a studio not under any time limit, any time constraint. They weren't forced to, we got to get this out on Xbox One and play same day. I mean, that would be insane. And instead they released first on PC. They're ironing it out PC before they go to PlayStation 5. So I think one of the biggest takeaways that you'd want to take from this public is that, microtransactions are not really the key, right? It is like a band-aid. Microtransactions are an aggressive, abusive band-aid to try and cure issues with the industry, right? Or to try and or to try. Am I counting on it again?
Yeah, you're kind of
yeah. That microtransactions and force schedules are not a yacht. Instead, giving the studios time to breathe and is really how you can a lesson that publishers will take away from this is that, okay, look, man, if we're looking at the meta, we're seeing, of course, Nintendo has the best game, right? But now Baldur 3, and every game kind of that's on there doesn't even have a microtransaction that I'm, and they're all were allowed to really work and to work right how they wanted to, and instead of being constrained and pressured to the capitalism abusive side of the game development. I think that's what publishers will take away. Gamers want games of this caliber, but they can only be created if the studios are allowed to work in that manner or fashion. And I'm hoping that's what the takeaway.
Yep, and I think my final point is similar to that it's not about just saying, let's all make a CRPG now.
Yeah.
It's about trying to figure out, maybe we should let the developer do their own thing.
Yeah.
And it's most likely not, this is not going to come from an Activision Blizzard, I think, at this point. Probably even maybe an EA, maybe Microsoft. We don't know in that respect. But as we've said, the advantage you have with companies that are established is that you have a group that knows what they want to make, that knows what they're good at. Forcing a massive studio to make a game that is antithetical to what they do, it's not going to make them solve that problem. We saw this again with BioWare, with Anthem. That you gave a premier studio the resources to make a third-person action RPG shooter, and it failed. Because that's not what BioWare makes. And again, if you think that this means that Larian can now go and make Devil May Cry,
oh my gosh, no,
it's not going to work like that. it's about, again, giving studios the room and the time they need to make a game, but also understanding what the studio can do. And it's why, as we've said, that when you're trying to force feed microtransactions, you're trying to force feed something that's not comparable or not comparable to the studio, it ends up hurting the game. And yes, games that have microtransactions, all this stuff, they do earn lots of money, but it's one of those reasons that we've said, like, why AAA development's gone so damn expensive. Why all this money has to be flooded in, and very little of that is being kind of attributed to the developer's success. So when we have a game like Hi-Fi Rush or Baldur's Gate 3 succeed, whereas a game like Diablo 4 is not looking that well, it's not a case of just saying, well, it's because Diablo 4 is an action RPG. Diablo 4 didn't do well because all these decisions kind of stem from a really bad source. And these are the kinds of things that it takes a studio to iron out, and it takes a studio the freedom to do that. Because I'm sure anyone who has their design worth their weight at Blizzard could tell that there was issues with that design. They may never admit it publicly, but I'm sure the publisher, I'm sure Activision said, well, no, we don't care about that. And that's where I think consumers need to fight. It's not about yelling at Blizzard or yelling at indie developers. It's about yelling at Electronic Arts, yelling at Microsoft, yelling at Sony, Nintendo, and so on, to tell them that we want quality games. And we want the studios to be able to be in that position to make them. Because again, if they're not in that position, we have all these indie developers who are more than happy to make a game that they want to see come out. And it has led to stuff like Disco Elysium, Celeste, Stardew Valley, and so on.
And dropping out again, falling away.
I
don't know.
So I think that is, other than ranting and raving about YouTubers and streamers, any other points before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, it's I find it a bit like kind of almost like depressing, the takes that everybody was, what people are taking away from this. This is a good thing. When we have a right, and this is great for the industry, right, and I am hoping that the industry will take notice. Like, finally, like, they're going to be like, okay, I see it. Baldur's Gate 3, I see it. Clearly, like, a game based off of only, like, cash shop first, right? Cash cow first, and consumer second isn't really the way to. And this is continue to make. And again, like, we don't, like you were saying earlier, we need to, yelling at divisions, and the way we need to do that is with our wallets, right? That's the only way they're going to listen. Is speaking with our wallets. So, buy Baldur's Gate 3, buy the game, and like, don't complain about like Call of Duty and right, like don't support the studios that are doing these tactics. And I think that's like one of the ways that we can make changes, because we're clearly seeing, right, that gamers still want the Elden Rings and the Baldur's Gates, and those are the games they want, and they don't want to be abused, microtransaction manipulated, right, and just seen as like whales and wallets. We want to, as gamers, and like produce a product for us that actually works. So I'm hoping that this will change the tides a little bit, and that maybe it'll open people's eyes that are not sure about how the development cycle works, or how it works, that we can start to understand, why games are so rare, why they are anomalies, and why they shouldn't be, right?
Yeah, like, again, like, the goal shouldn't be that over the next decade we get 5 more Baldur's Gate level quality CRPGs. We want to see our 5 games given the quality of support that Larian had access to make Baldur's Gate.
Yeah,
And whether we
exactly.
get a new take on Monster Hunter, or a new kind of Pokemon, or maybe even a new kind of action game, that's the kind of thing that people should be excited about. Again, to go back to, as you were saying, in terms of like CRPGs, like we saw this very same thing with the horror genre. That AAA studios were like, well, no one wants horror anymore, so they started to phone it in. They tried to do different things with it, and it just ended up failing. The independent scene picked it up, and people were like, oh, well, maybe horror's back. So
Yeah.
Capcom decided to make Resident Evil 7, and the story kind of, and we all know the story from there. But if they would have taken from the lesson, saying, well, if people like horror, let's just make Five Nights at Freddy's, or let's just make Resident Evil 6 again, no one would have been there for Resident Evil 7. It's about, again, understanding that the stakes of game dev are always being raised.
Yeah.
Every new success, every new change or evolution is going to affect what people expect out of games. You want to be continuing to grow and evolve. Like we've said, like again, when I emailed or when I interviewed Rami Ishmael, if he made Nuclear Throne today, it would have failed.
Yeah.
Because again, it's been a long time and evolutions happen. And you have to be looking forward, looking at how UI UX grows. And like we've said, like CRPGs technically did not die over the 2010s. There are a lot of independent developers who've made them. But they also made them in that same kind of very esoteric style. That if you're not already a super huge CRPG fan, you're not going to enjoy it. And it's why we see with games like Elden Ring and Baldur's Gate 3 this idea of, let's take what works and let's make it something that is palatable to everyone else. And lo and behold, people like Baldur's Gate, and they like Elden Ring, and they probably would. I'm going to bet that a lot of people who are loving Baldur's Gate 3 would have hated Baldur's Gate 2. Just as a lot of people who first time played Elden Ring probably couldn't stand Demon Souls.
Yeah, give him Demon Souls. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they would totally hate it. Exactly. It's the evolution to get there, right? Like, it takes all that pedigree of the studio, all of the work to get to where it is today, and that cannot be forgotten.
Mm-hmm. So I think that is a good point to end on for our stream tonight. So anything else from you before we wrap things up?
No, I think that's about it. I'm gonna try and play it a little more tonight, and probably won't be kissing any squids, but I'll keep playing it and see how it goes. But I think, yeah.
All right. So for me, we're gonna wrap things up for our show. We'll be back next Saturday around 5 p.m. ET. If you have a suggestion for a future show topic, let us know in the comments down below. Do the YouTubing algorithmic stuff people tell you to do. And if you still want to make something for the Game Wisdom Game Jam, you have exactly 8 days. Or I'm sorry.
8 days.
Yep, about
8 days. Is it 8 days?
No, 9 days. I'm sorry.
9 days.
Well, a little less than 9 days now to get something in. So be sure to sign up, check out the Discord. Usually we keep things on the Discord channel, Grumpy, but we try to keep things somewhat on time. This week I was late because I was doing a library talk around 4. But other than that, I think that's it for me. Buy all my books, get all the Souls Lakes and RPGs books. If you want my books to evolve, I'll need you to buy at least 1,000 copies a piece.
That's right. Yeah.
That's how books evolve. You buy enough, and then you hit book level 5, and then the book Pokemon evolves into like the next quality tier.
Exactly. Yeah, and for me, my links will be down below with Samurai Pig and Rooster Rampage. Follow me on the socials. And of course, join the Discord. Do the Game Jam. We got less than 9 days, so please join the Game Jam. We got 50 right now, so let's go a little more, make our judging time, extend our judging time. But other than that, yeah. Thanks everybody for joining. Vin, Amanda, Malinowis, everybody, Rats, everybody for joining in.
And remember, folks, I expect Baldur's Gate level quality for all prototype submissions.
Right. There's no way. The bar has been raised now, so all game jams have to.
You can all overcommit now. You can all go above and beyond, because I know all of you have been held back.
Yeah, I know you're waiting for the excuse to finally over deliver. This is your chance. So go forth and over deliver.
All right, everyone. So with that said, have a great rest of your weekend. Stay cool, and we'll be back next time. So come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where you some of the art and science of games. And have a great rest of your weekend.